Amanda and Rory, thank you so much for being on the Authors on Audio podcast. We're here today to talk about your book, Faith and Ruin. The first question I like to ask pretty much every single author I have on the podcast is, how did you become writers? What was the inspiration behind this book? Just tell me all about that.
I think I'm going to probably start with that one. I don't know, my journey was more with like comics. I grew up reading comic books as like from 9 years old, and I still do. So it was more of like a visual storytelling. And we actually make comics together, or we used to. We don't so much anymore, but just like watching Saturday morning cartoons in the 90s, the big stories, and then that kind of moved on to in college. He got me into Dungeons and Dragons, and that's more of like a storytelling avenue. So like going from there, from comics and cartoons to D&D, and then it just seemed like a natural progression to do novel writing from there, like telling the stories from our campaigns, basically.
Yeah, for me, it was, actually really early on, I wanted to be a writer. It wasn't necessarily my thing. Yeah, I enjoyed telling stories, and that was sort of how my passion grew, was just sharing these stories and telling different stories, entertaining people. When I went to college, and even before then, even in high school, I started making, short films, short movies. My dad had gotten a video camera, and so we were making stories that way, and little entertaining videos. And so to me, that opened up this whole nother avenue of how to tell stories visually. And then through Dungeons and Dragons, I had my hand at being a dungeon master and telling stories that way, and I'd already had an interest in making sort of my own world, and then we were like, hey, why don't we make this world where these campaigns take place? And so that was sort of the birth of this story. Actually was one of a campaign that we ran
Long time ago. Yeah.
Really? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Geez, when did we play that? It was probably like 2012.
Yeah, that sounds about
right. It was
right.
a long time ago. We usually play with he's got two older brothers, and so we play with those two, and then his younger sister. So it's kind of like a Webb family thing. But he came up with this idea, and he wanted to have us, like, usually, I don't know if you're familiar with D&D, but usually just play one character. He wanted to tell like the story, but from two different like sides. Like one side, like the adventurers, and then the other side, like the political aspect. So we each had our primary character and then our secondary character. And so it was kind of interesting because we had two that we would play like a little bit from this side, and then the like last half of the time that we played would be like during these like council meetings where you do like, votes and all this. There's like a war starting. And so that kind of was where the Faith and Ruin thing came, with the two different kind of storylines that happened concurrently in the book.
And with the meeting, the plenum of Praetoria, so it's like this ruling council that, sort of rules over the region there in the city. At the time, I was working for the public access, so part of what I would do is record these city meetings. And there's a lot of times where it wasn't very exciting, but there were a lot of times where it was actually really interesting, and like people would get upset about things, and so that there was a lot of inspiration from these council meetings that I'd record. And so there's actually some of the characters are actually based on some of the people.
Like small city government people. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Don't name any names.
No, we won't say who.
It was interesting. It was definitely some influences with, some of those, because they have their own like way they would deal with things and handle people and talk with people, and some various issues that they would deal with.
That's so interesting. It's funny. I was just talking to another author yesterday about how every time I ask an author like the inspiration behind their story, they always are like clipping little things from their real life to put into their stories, and Just goes to show you have to be, if you're friends with an author, you need to be careful. You could end up in a book
Yeah.
somewhere. So
I have
gotta
said
be
to my
cautious.
friends that they'll like complain about somebody at work or whatever, and I don't know who these people are. I'm like, do you want me to put them in my book and I'll kill them savagely? I'm like, oh yeah.
Perfect.
Like, okay, if you tell me that, I'm gonna do it.
That's a true friend right there. I love
Yes.
that. That's best revenge.
Yes.
So can you tell me then, what is your process like co-writing a book? Because I know with my own writing process, I'm very territorial. Don't know how I would be having to share that. So take me through your process from, starting the book to finishing it off.
So how we do it now, we've got it way more streamlined. Because he's more of a planner. Like, he's the spreadsheet guy. I talk about it a lot on Instagram. I like make fun of myself because I'm so bad with planning and spreadsheets, but he's very good at that. I am not. So it works out well. What we do is we'll come up with an idea and we'll kind of talk it over, and then he will get me a spreadsheet with the outline. And so it's not like we plot it out, very detailed. It's more like this is happening, and then this happens, and then this happens. So just kind of like the order of things. For shorter stories, it's easier. The big ones like Faith and Ruin, there's like lots of different threads. So then he'll do that, and then I'll start doing the first draft with the outline. Like, it's like my emotional support outline now. Like, I can't write without one anymore. Before, there's been a couple times where I would just get excited and start writing, and then I would, always end up like, I don't know how to get out of this. Like, this is going nowhere. And then he's like, oh, here we go again. Like, I got to get her out of this hole.
Yeah, I'd say, I am very much like a planner and want to, plot out. And I think this story in particular is a challenge because we're still going through it. We're pretty much have book 3 written at this point, and I'm actually doing a read through now. But there's a lot that's changed, and I think we've definitely have learned a lot going through this process. And you talk about being territorial, and I think both of us are territorial in our own ways. And so there's times where we'll have some good discussion,
heated discussions
about how, like, I think we need to do this, and this is why we need to do this, and Amanda will be like, well, no, we need to do this. I think that's ridiculous. That needs to be like this, and that's good because we ultimately will come to an understanding and an agreement of. And I think it's good to challenge those ideas because just because I have this. Oh, I have the outline like this, and I think this needs to happen. There's times where I'll start reading through, and I'm like, you know what? It makes sense to do this because the way it sort of has organically grown. And as we go through the outline, things change. I think as we work through the outline, I think a lot of times when Amanda's writing, it just sort of goes. She'll go in these directions sometimes, and it's off the outline, but it works because it organically has to grow like that. And so it is an outline, and it's not something that, it's a guide. It's not end all be all.
Yeah.
This is exactly how it has to happen. So then we just sort of take turns reading through it, making changes. For me, the first go a read through is I just read through it just to get a feel of what's there. The second read through for me is more of, okay, where are we heading with the story? We'll make maybe some of those bigger changes in the story through that, or some moderate changes, and then that, I usually read through at least a third time, and that's like really
continuity.
Yeah,
sometimes.
continuity.
Yeah.
What time of day was it?
Yeah.
Was it that time of day? Were they wearing this? Did they have this injury? They would actually do this.
I always
now.
forget injuries.
Yes.
A lot.
It's amazing how much those things can slip through the cracks. You'll be writing and it'll, you forget someone's missing their right hand. I was just reading a book where somebody is missing their right hand. As a reader, I completely forgot until it got mentioned later in the chapter.
And you're like, wait, did this happen? It's like you need to have little reminders throughout, like for the reader and the author, obviously.
Totally. So then what strengths do you feel like the other person brings to the table as you're collaboratively writing? Like, Rory, what do you think Amanda's biggest strength in writing is, and vice versa?
So for Amanda, I would say 2 things that really pop into my mind is I do like how she will just go. She'll just go. And that's good. Sometimes that's what you need. And frequently, if I'm sort of stuck on something or if I'm trying to work through something, that really makes me like have to go a lot faster. Okay, let's get this done now. And so it drives me. Her ability to just jump into it, I think, is one thing that I appreciate. Even though it's more difficult for me to do something like that, she's really great at that. I'd say the other thing is really bringing the characters to life. And that is, an outline doesn't capture that really. And, we could say, oh, well, so-and-so is sort of like this, or they're upset about this. But writing that and bringing that to this character to full life where you feel something for them, she does a great job with that. And that's a huge strength where there's these characters that are they're just sort of a very basic outline of who they are. We know who they are, but to make the readers feel like that's who this character is, that's where Amanda really brings these characters to life.
I would say for Rory is the planning, definitely. He likes to have it. Like, we will get in discussions about, like, world building a lot. He'll be like,
I'm sure.
How many moons are there in Akira? I'm like, man, I don't know. There's just one moon. I've written about the moon. Like, but, and he'll be like, no, we really got to think about this. And I'll get annoyed because all I want to do is, like, write about, somebody yearning after somebody else or whatever. Like, I want to do the character stuff, but you can't just have that. Like, you can't just have just these characters in a vacuum. Like, nobody wants to read about that. We want the world to feel real and like somewhere that you want to go and you want to stay there. And he excels in like making it feel like a real place. And like there's a history and there's all these things like in the real world that people just know about. And I am not very great with all those details, and he's a lot better with it than I am. So like the mixture of planner, world builder guy, and then, prose, humorous character girl, like us together, like it makes it a stronger story overall, I think.
How do you guys handle creative blocks or self-doubt as writers?
Oh, was it I think I wrote, when I get in like a mood, I'll just stop and I'll like draw something smutty and then get off the internet. That's usually helps me. That note's so weird. Yeah, because I'm an illustrator too, so that is a very important part of the process for me too, is having the drawings. So obviously there's no smutty drawings in there, but I draw those for people sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. It usually snaps me out of it, just get away from it for a while.
Yeah, I'd say for me, trying to work through those creative blocks, it's about being able to pivot. And for me, that's difficult because I like to, when I'm tackling something, I like to get it done and then move on to the next thing. But, frequently you can't do that. And some of these things that I'm working on are maybe pretty big. They're big picture things, and you're not going to just sort of figure it all out. So sometimes when I get stuck on that, it's, it's important to be able to pivot to one of those other projects. Maybe it's an unrelated project. Maybe it's a different part that we're working on that, okay, this will be a lot easier to do. It's maybe a lower hanging fruit that I know I can accomplish. And it sort of gives me time to think about maybe, sometimes not working on the thing and then coming back to it, you sort of have this fresh mind of, fresh ideas, and you can usually get through it that way.
For sure. I was going to say, Amanda, I think it's so special that like you're able to draw these illustrations. Like, for the record, I really enjoyed them in the book. I loved the illustrations. I wish there was more of that. And like, I feel like once you turn, 16, they stop putting pictures in books.
Yeah,
and
why?
I think that's because they're lame. That's why.
I know. And I don't understand. Like, there's this weird, like, I don't know, taboo. Like, if you have pictures in your book, it's a kid's book, and it doesn't have to be. Like, why? I don't know.
No.
Like, I don't agree with that, and I'll always have drawings in my books. So it's important to me, and I know that kind of goes in with you have a question about like the difference with the publishing industry, and like if we tried to go the traditional route, we wouldn't be able to do that. Like, they're going to be like, absolutely not. I don't want you illustrating your cover. Like, we want, like, you know, a professional. Like, I want my cover to look like that. I want character portraits in there. I want drawings. Like, I want people to see what I see in my head when I'm writing and drawing them. And so far, I haven't had any negative, like, feedback about the drawing, so that's been nice. Like, okay, validation, you know.
Yeah, man, if somebody did give you negative feedback about those, I think definitely not your target
enough.
audience,
like,
I guess.
Yeah, nah, then this ain't for you. Move on, thank you. Yeah.
No, it helps with the visualization. And, you know, I always say, this is usually a critique I give when like TV adaptations veer too far away from the original source material. But, you know, nobody knows the story better than the author.
Yeah.
So in creating these illustrations, it just kind of serves to bring it to life even more. And I for one, really, really enjoyed it. What do you wish you would have known before you started writing Faith and Ruin? What's the big lesson?
My big lesson is I feel like the writing is the easy part. It's like everything after is just, it's hard not having, I didn't realize until after, you know, we published, there's just, you don't get any feedback. You don't know if anybody's reading your book if they don't talk about it. And not everybody talks about the books they read. So like, I could just be going weeks and have like, oh, nobody's reading my book. And you have to, it's hard because I get really down about it, obviously, as being an illustrator wanting, you know, validation, I guess, or like people to like want what I create. And then to not get the feedback, I'm more of like a outgoing kind of person. So I like to hear what people think, even if it's bad, you know. Obviously, I don't want to hear the bad stuff, but just not having that. Like, you just have to be okay with not knowing. And you have to be okay with just doing it for yourself. Like, you might not go big. You know, obviously we're not going big, but that doesn't mean it might not happen. But you have to be okay with setting like realistic goals and doing it for yourself and not for the external validation. And that's kind of hard. It can be hard.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, you know, with focusing on the craft is something I think we have to really remind ourselves. And, you know, it's about telling the story. It's about sharing this with people. It's not about, oh, well, I've got this amount of numbers and this is this and this is that. And, whether or not that happens, I mean, that's not really our focus, and nor should it be, because, you know, it's about, I think that's a distraction to your writing process if you're so worried about that. I think another thing that would have been, at least for me, knowing going into this and sort of being where we are in the process, is just coming up with all of these like systems and this history and this and that. There's so much stuff that you start to realize, oh man, we should have had that figured out, because it's starting to come up in the story. And you can only be so vague before you need to start establishing details, and a lot of that stuff matters, and you hate to go back and have to, what do we put in there? Oh, we just put that in there as sort of like, not a placeholder, but, you know, maybe that's just what we had said at that point, but now we really dug deep into it and we want to, you know, you're sort of stuck with that. So it's, I think it's really important to, I guess, prioritize what things you need to figure out, and then establish that. But you need to keep working on that, because you never know when things are going to come up in the story and you're like, oh man, we got to figure that out. And sometimes that takes a while to figure that out.
Yeah, totally. No, I've found like stories, they sort of take on a life of their own at some point. Continuity is, it's one of the great challenges of, especially when you're writing something, you know, this is a series, the book alone is already pretty, you know, hefty. And then it's a series on top of that. And you got to keep everything cohesive throughout.
Man, yes.
That's not an easy thing to do, for sure.
It's fun, but it's hard. Yeah.
Let's talk about Faith and Ruin a little bit, the story, because we're talking about your writing process a lot. I definitely want to get to the story. There's a sort of theme of there being no good guys per se. Each sort of faction of this world seems to be responsible for its own, you know, maybe they do some good in the world, maybe they've committed some atrocities. Can you tell me everything about, that part of the story building.
Well, I guess we could start a little bit with the deities. So the deities we have in the story, when we originally were creating these, we had 12 of them. We still have 12. We had some that were more evil, and then some that were more good, and some that were sort of like more of a neutral. And I don't know when we really decided to change this. I think it was probably when we were writing the book. We really were like, I really would like for each of these deities to have, it's about how you interpret
the perspective, or like what they do. Like a Vitame person, you'd think they're going to be good because they value life and, all that good stuff. But you can twist that into something that's not necessarily good, obviously, which is one of the themes that happens in the book. But
well, and I think as far as like the deities, I think that with this story, it's dealing with Vitame and Cax, and there's obviously some things going on between the two where they don't like each other. Their followers generally don't like each other. But is either one in the wrong? Well, I mean, yeah, in some cases, but they've been striking at each other, and I think that's more of a real thing that happens instead of just having, well, there's this good goddess and
everybody's good that follows them. It's boring.
Like and I think that this thought sort of bleeds over to our characters as well, where we have a lot of characters that are complex. There's definitely some characters that are a little more good, but even a lot of the good characters aren't necessarily like they do everything perfect. They are completely doing all the right things, because that's not generally what people necessarily do. And so I think it makes for interesting characters. I think that it makes for an interesting deities. We don't even get into a lot of the other deities in this world, but there's a lot of interpretations on all of them, and good and bad.
Definitely. I think something I noticed while I was reading it is, first of all, I am such a stickler when it comes to, I said this in a previous podcast, but I like to think more in terms of antagonists versus villains, in that the antagonist is just sort of in the path of your protagonist as opposed to being purely evil. I agree with you. I find it very boring. It feels unrealistic. And I didn't get that with your world building at all. I saw the nuance there immediately, and it felt very true to real life, I think.
Yeah. Because like the antagonist thinks that they're the main character and what they're doing is the right thing, and the protagonist would be in their way. So it's more interesting to read about people who believe they're doing the right thing, but they're going about it in a way that is presented, okay, maybe that's not the best way to do it. Like killing all the descendants of Vitame is probably not the best thing to do, but for them, it's not. It makes sense to them. Like this makes sense. I want to do this. My goddess told me to do this.
Well, they're trying, you're trying to avenge, a wrong that has been done to you and your people and your friends and your family, and you want to do something about it, even if that means, attacking others. Obviously it's not a great thing. I think with a lot of the characters, they believe what they're doing is validating to their deity and to what they should be doing. And they're only doing what's been done to them. And, not that it's an eye for an eye, but, somewhat.
Yeah, I feel like you see that a lot with Midori's character. Am I pronouncing her name correctly?
Yeah.
You see that a lot with her, where she's very angry, but also justifiably so. And yet, at the same time, she's seen the cracks in the pavement on her side, too. And it's almost like she feels... I didn't get the sense she quite knows what to do with it at this point.
Yeah. Like, either your whole life you're spent with these people who are telling you to do these things, but it feels wrong. What do you do with that? How do you move on from that? Or what do you even do about it? Can you do anything about it? You're just one person. She was kind of like... She didn't have a whole lot to start with, and she kind of like grew in the telling of the story and became more, I don't know, like she's interesting. She's a little bit harder for me to write because I'm not like her at all. Like, it's hard to write somebody who is super cool when you're not super cool, but I don't know. I think she's got some cool stuff coming. Like she's interesting. I really she's grown. Like she's grown on me.
Well, and I think Midori too. I think she's the kind of character who is able to see sort of beyond today and tomorrow, and she's like, what are we doing? Where are we going with this? And I think she sees that there's, what are things gonna be like for them in a year, in 5 years, and I think she has some pretty big concerns about that.
So pivoting a little bit, so you have Midori, who seems like just very sharp, and as you were saying, she's really looking ahead. Let's shift gears a little bit to talking about Quay, who is, I would say as a reader, she seemed to have kind of the purest heart of anybody in there. And I don't want to get into any major spoilers in case anybody is watching this and curious, but she definitely ends up questioning some things, I think, by the end of the book and trying to understand. I think it's hard for her to understand that she's not on the side of like a supreme good, because that's what she wanted to be a part of. Can you talk to me a little bit more about her character and those realizations?
Yeah, there's a lot more with that. She has a hard time in book 2. There's some things that happen that will really like shake her faith, I guess. Because you're right, she does feel her whole life she's thought, she's doing good and she wants to do good and be like a force for good in the world. And she's believed that very strongly that her goddess is good. And then when you start like hearing things from the other side and then like looking into it a little more and like the histories and kind of seeing like, okay, these things that, these people that I know not that long ago, they did these things that are not good. Like they hurt people. And how do you reckon with that, as somebody who wants to do good only? And so there's going to be some struggle with that. Like how do you fix a system that is kind of corrupt? How can you fix it from the inside, I guess? Like, is it even worth trying? Like, do you stay within the system and try to fix it from within? Or do you give up and say, this is wrong. I can't be a part of this anymore. And then you just let it do whatever it's going to do. So there's a little bit of that, not so much in the first book, but it is going to be like more prominent part of the story in the, future books that are going to be out soon.
I think Quay she can be very naive. She hasn't seen the world as much as some of the other characters have. And I think that shows. You see Gideon has obviously seen a lot of things. I think with Quay, she has a very limited view of what's happening, and that's slowly widening now, and it will continue through the next couple books where she's going to see a lot more on how the world works and the reality of some of these people that she's been involved with. And I think a good example of somebody who's sort of maybe been on this journey a little bit already has been Avendia. And you can see she holds herself a little bit differently. She's also involved in the Church of Idame. Her outlook is a little bit different than Quay's. In a way, I think Aven sees herself in Quay as a young version and is trying to like protect her a little bit because she knows about all of this stuff. She knows how things are. She knows how life can be, and I think she knows at some point that she's gonna face this, and there's definitely going to be some struggles that Quay has in the future.
Yeah, I'm wondering, was there anything that you really loved as authors that just didn't make the final cut of the book that, I don't know, maybe would end up in a director's cut version of the book? Or, they say you have to kill your darlings sometimes as a writer. Which darlings did you have to kill?
It's funny. We were trying to remember that phrase, and Rory was like, what is it called? Kill your deers? And so we always call it kill your deers. It wasn't like, we were talking about this earlier, like, I can't think of like major cuts. It's more like characters changed a lot to better fit the story. Coming from a D&D campaign, There was a lot more characters in the plenum. There was like, a counselor for, I don't know, something.
Agriculture.
Yeah, like we cut so many, like nobody wants to read about this guy that doesn't do anything. Like he's just there. He's like a side dude. So, that wasn't hard to cut, but just streamlining it. And we were talking about Bracton a little bit because his was hard because he wasn't originally a POV. We changed. I think it was Keegan was a POV, and the beta readers were like, "Why is he in here?" Like, and they had a point. Like, why are we reading about this dude? And he doesn't really have anything to do necessarily with the main story. So we were like, okay, how do we fix this? Like, it makes sense that what they're saying. Like, this guy doesn't have anything to do with it right now. So then, it took a little while to figure out, like, well, why don't we have Bracton? It's like he's watching the sky or whatever, And so he kind of like took on his own. He became more important. And he was like, I think it was like 2 different characters, which if you read the book, then it makes sense. But we're like, why don't we just make it the same guy? Yeah, okay. So that was Rory's idea. Like, he was like, we wanted both characters, but didn't make sense to have 2 similar characters like that. So we just made him the same guy. And it worked out. I think it was interesting how that worked out.
There were a lot of adaptations that we had to make from the original campaign. It's different, like when you have a handout, you can reference all these people and constantly go back to it and look. It's a little bit different in a book. You're reading about these people. You don't want to have to constantly go back. Who is this?
It just gets boring and kind of just trudging through it.
And it's just, so we did have to cut some people and we combined roles. And I think it worked. And actually that allowed us to really, instead of trying to have these 2 different characters and we're trying to develop these 2 different characters and make you feel something for them, we could combine it in one and give them more screen time. And invest in them a little bit more. And I think that was definitely the right thing to do. Rendavos is a good example. He had more. I think he's gotten a little bit more involved in the story than we necessarily originally thought. He plays a pretty big role in that, but he's definitely become a very pivotal character on the plenum side of things and continues to throughout the books.
Were there any other characters that sort of took on a life of their own in that way? Or maybe, from the original planning, you had this one idea for a character and then they just sort of became their own thing as the story developed?
I would say mostly for me it was Bracton. He's like, it's hard because I'm like in book 2 mode in my brain, and he has like way more of a presence, and he's just really fun to write. Like, I don't know, he just kind of became this snarky, dangerous guy, and I'm like, man, I like being in his head, but he took on more of a life of, got more important. Rendavos, like you were saying.
Well, I think even Quay a little bit.
Yeah, she wasn't even in. She was like an NPC in the D&D campaign.
Really?
She had no personality. She was just there to heal us when we got to town, when we got in fights, which is a very D&D thing. Like, you're a healer. We just didn't have one in our group. So Rory made, there's this priestess, she'll heal you for free. And I don't know, she just kind of, now she's like very important. Like, she's one of the main characters. So yeah.
Well, but I mean, you really like, okay, so she's part of this main group. She's hiring these bodyguards, and she's sort of going around and sort of servicing and helping the various churches in the area. And I mean, it just sort of grew from there. As we were writing this outline, it was like, oh, she's a really big part of this. I mean, it sort of was revolving around her at this point. Again, combining some of the characters, we had some of the original players sort of, I think, combined into this role of Quay. And so this importance of this priestess in training for the Church of Idame, she really took a life of her own in this story and suddenly became the pillar of the story.
That's so interesting for me to hear, because Quay was actually my favorite character, I think, reading the whole book. So it's very interesting for me to hear that she started off a little less significant. That's, wow.
Yeah. Well, I would say Quay, thinking about it a little bit, she, I think, enveloped the spirit of all the players of the campaign and the direction they took things and wanting to do this and wanting to go and fix this and make this better. So I think we took the decisions of a lot of the players and that sort of is Quay, after thinking about it a little bit.
I guess, yeah.
So because like they were, we're going to go do this and we want to go help this person. And so while Quay might not have done that in the original story, she was just sort of with them. I think she's really enveloped and is representative of all the decisions of all the sort of the collective decision making of all the players that were in the original campaign and what they wanted to do, and that's Quay pretty much.
Shifting gears again, I want to make sure we talk about social media a little bit while we have some time left.
Yeah.
What does your relationship with social media look like as indie authors? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
That's more my thing. He doesn't. I mean, I'll show him stuff, and he knows. He hears my woes about social media every single day. It's sort of like a love-hate relationship because it's so much easier, I think, having that vehicle to get your book out there, but at the same time, it's easy for everybody. So you're just yelling into a crowd where there's millions of other people who have the same thing. They're trying to basically sell their story. So how do you make yourself stand out? And there's the algorithm, whatever. Everybody's all talking about how it doesn't benefit, and it doesn't. And that's just, there's nothing I can do about that. I just got to keep trucking along and hoping that somebody sees a stupid post that I make and jokes about my book, and they're like, oh, that sounds interesting. And all it takes is for the right person to see your content and then read the book and then become a fan and then talk about it to their friends. That's all that it takes. So it's like easy and hard at the same time and very frustrating. And I love it and I hate it at the same time. And like, it's just a very volatile relationship. It's hard. And I didn't realize before like how hard it is, like marketing a book is. You hear indie authors, I'm sure every single one talks about how much they hate marketing their book. You just run out of ideas. Like I don't know, like just read my book. Like it's good, I promise. It's long, but if you like this, then you'll like it. And sometimes it's frustrating and tiring and exhausting, and you spend hours and hours and hours making these slides on Canva, that's where I do most of my stuff. Like I do love Canva, but yeah, I don't know. It is a very much love-hate relationship with social media for sure.
Do you have anything to add, Rory, or is that mostly her department?
Yeah, it's mostly her thing. I try to do what I can to support, whether it's, making content or, other promotional things or short videos and stuff, graphics and all that. But yeah, I don't really have that much of a presence on social media. I am very much an introvert, so it's not really my interest. It's definitely more of a challenge for me. So I just try to help her where I can, because that's really her wheelhouse. And I know it's tough. I can't.
He just listens to me whine about it a lot.
The emotional support, right?
Yeah, like you need to just get it out and like whine about it. Like sometimes that's all I need, and then I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm level again.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any words of wisdom, but I can definitely assure you're not alone. In having that sort of love-hate relationship. It's sort of most of my guests, and I feel this way too, feel that, social media is just sort of a necessary evil, especially if you're a smaller indie author, but you make the most with what you got.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at least we have that. Like, I don't know what people did before. How do you promote a book when you don't have the internet? Like, how did they do it before? I don't know. I wasn't writing back then, so.
Beats me. I mean,
scary.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys are Brandon Sanderson fans. He has. Oh, have you watched his writing courses?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he talks a little bit in the later courses about, he touches on indie publishing a little bit. And yeah, I mean, I feel like indie publishing, it just wasn't as viable an option before social media. So I guess we got to be grateful to it, at least somewhat, I suppose. At least somewhat,
yeah. And I know, because we watched those when I was writing, and they were very informative, but some of it is just like, I can't just send an email to Tor and say, hey, will you publish my book? Like, it doesn't work like that anymore.
No.
And where he was talking about finding an agent and stuff, that's just scary to me. Like, it's very intimidating. And I have some friends who have tried like querying or whatever, and how they get like nice words, but then they say no. And it's like, I think my little heart would not take all the rejection. So I'm like, I'm just going to skip that. Like, I'm just going to skip that entirely, because I know myself enough that would probably, like, I don't know, I'd have a really hard time continuing. Just, I don't know, maybe I'm just a coward, but.
No, like, you're not.
Well, yeah.
I'm 115 queries in. I've been querying for like a year and a half, and you almost get numb to it, to be honest, at some point. Like, you come to just expect to hear radio silence, or maybe you get like a nice thank you, something but this is nice. Not for me.
Yeah, that we can't market this, or yeah. I'll just do it myself. I'm a kind of a control freak. Yeah, like about all aspects of my life, so it makes sense to want to do it myself, even though it's harder.
You did an excellent job, so
thank you.
Okay, this is the fun question. I love asking this question it's always the last question I ask my guests. But what are some of the books and the authors that inspire your writing the most?
I'm more of a reader than Rory, so mine's more like books. T. Kingfisher is my absolute favorite writer of all time. When I'm kind of like, I guess I'm a couple years in. Like, I don't know. I think I saw the cover of Paladin's Grace, and somebody was recommending it on Reddit. Like, I was on a romance Reddit or something, and I read it, and it was like, I knew, like, the first sentence. I was like, oh my God, like, I'm going to love this book. And I did, and it's my favorite book of all time. Like, and now I'm like, read everything that she writes. Something about her, like, humor and like blending like horror and romance and fantasy was like, I read it and I'm like, wow, I want to write now. If she can do this, like, it just like changed my brain chemistry. I'm like, I want to do this now. I have all these stories, and if somebody can blend all this and be humorous and not take themselves too seriously, but it's still like a serious story, like, it still makes you feel things, like, that's amazing. So she's like, I would love to meet her and like get her autograph, or be like a really awkward fangirl, like, oh my God, I love you. Yeah. Before, I guess, other than, obviously Brandon Sanderson, he's huge. We went to Dragonsteel a couple years ago, so that was really cool, like, to like see him. Yeah, that was a whole thing. It was like a very expensive just sort of trip for us too.
Yeah, it was a cool event though.
Yeah, it was amazing. Brian K. Vaughan is a comic writer. He does Saga. I don't know if you're familiar with comics. His comics they're really good. Like, they're very moving and like smart. And I don't know, he just takes these like wild ideas and makes them into these amazing stories. Those are probably my, like, those two, Brian K. Vaughan and T. Kingfisher for sure.
I'd say for me, I'm not like a huge reader, but what really started, my brother was like, hey, after I started playing D&D with them, they let me join their group, and I started playing D&D. He's like, hey, you should really read this Dark Elf trilogy by R.A. Salvatore. And so I started with that, reading about Drizzt and the Dark Elf trilogy, and moved on to the Icewind Dale trilogy. And just reading through those stories was like, wow, this is really, really awesome. And reading about the Dark Elves and, in the Underdark, where they have this whole different society, really got me thinking of like, wow, that's really cool that they're this whole made up society that is based on Dungeons and Dragons, Forgotten Realms. But, it was really cool just learning about it and reading about it and all the different parts of it and the cultures there. And, it was inspiring to me to really, start thinking about, well, what would my own world look like? What would that be like? What races are in there? How would it work? How are all these, different aspects of it? So that was pretty influential for me. Another person who's not an author, well, I guess he is, because he wrote a book called Rebel Without a Crew. Robert Rodriguez.
The director, film director.
He directed, his first film that he did, Mariachi, he did like this really, really low budget. And now this is like the days before internet and all this stuff where, he had to really be crafty on what he did and how he did it. But he was able to shoot his project with an extremely low budget. And so he wrote a book called Rebel Without a Crew, because it was pretty much just like him. And maybe I think he had some other, a couple other friends helping him, And he actually, won some film festivals with that, and he really got some visibility with his project. But what was really cool with this book that he wrote was he really reinforced this message to just go out and do it. Try to wait for these ideal conditions or wait for other people or wait for things to happen. You just go out and you do it. You make mistakes, and that's how you learn. And, I think with a lot of our, we did some comics before Faith and Ruin. And, I think it was important for us to just get out and do that. And Robert Rodriguez really drove that point home. And it's something that I believe in and I think is valid for any author, any artist, any storyteller, any creator to really just go do it. Go make mistakes. And have fun doing it, and then you learn, and then you'll make something better the next time you do it.
Yeah, and just keep going and don't go back. You can't keep going back and doing the same. Some people are very finicky and want it to be perfect, so they keep going back to the first thing and to make it perfect. It's not gonna be you just gotta move. No. You gotta move forward always.
No, I agree with that sentiment 100%. That's definitely my philosophy. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm definitely going to check him out because I'd never heard of him before.
He had me read it. It's really good.
Yeah, it's a very easy read.
And he writes it. It's easy to read, and he talks about how he was doing medical trials for
to raise money
to get money for his movie. This is what in the early 90s or something.
Yeah,
so it's not necessarily like that anymore, but just the weird creative things that he did to get money for his movie. He subjected his body to all kinds of trial meds.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's commitment right there. Yes. So Amanda and Rory, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Everyone make sure you pick up a copy of Faith and Ruin. Sounds like, what is book 2 called? It's coming out in August, or have you not released the title yet?
Yeah, it's called Faith and Ruin, Eye of the Maelstrom. And it comes out August 27th. Yeah.
Awesome. So pick up your copy of Eye of the Maelstrom on August 27th. And yeah, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much.